So this is the tutorial for the Jerry Uelsmann demo, where you're simply going to make a draft of what you might want to do. So what I did here is I chose my images. I chose a landscape. I chose a body part. I chose one small object and a second small object. I placed them all into the same file because now I'm going to merge them together. So the first thing I need to do is I need to take this eye and make it a little bit smaller. Make sure I have the layer selected, hit Control T, and I'm going to shrink that eye down. And I want a relatively small one. Let's go with that. Done. I'm going to turn back on my background. I'm going to turn back on the landscape. And I'm going to duplicate that layer because I'm going to need to make some edits on that. So I have my duplicate. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my eye, and my idea, was to place the eye into the sky and to make this eye a little bit bigger than it probably should be. So again, I'm going to hit Control T, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Check that off. Now I need to smooth these together. So in this case, I guess I would use the eraser to start with. And looking for my eraser. There we go. And I'm just going to take the eraser, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. There we go. I'm going to take the opacity on that and I'm going to drop it a lot. Because all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take off the edges here so that it looks like this eye is merging. Okay. And there are many ways that we can do this, but for the purposes of this tutorial, just getting the basics down is fine. I don't expect this to look perfect. I just want the basics. So I can do it that way. Just start to erase on the edges, try to make it look like it's starting to merge. Okay, so I can do that. And it's a little bit too much on the opacity, so I do want to drop it a little bit more because I want this subtle. I want it soft. And I'll be honest, I'm not doing the best job here. But I also don't want to have this tutorial be 80 ages long. The other thing I could also do is I could go to the Band-Aid tool and I could see what the computer thinks in terms of, ooh, that was a terrible choice. See what the computer thinks in terms of trying to patch this. It's not doing a good job. So I'm going to try something else. I'm going to merge these two layers. And now I'm going to try that tool. It's doing a better job now. Because I've merged the layers, it understands that I want to try to make them, or that's a mistake, want to try to make it clean and soft. So I can try that. That didn't work. Or I could also go through and I could use the smudge tool. Ooh, too big. Smudge the edge. That's sort of working. So simple version is I'm going to go through and I'm going to try to find a way to make all of this fit together and look like it's realistically there. Okay, so that's my first stage. I just want to do a little bit more work with the eraser tool up here because it's just I'm going to have to bump the opacity up. It's still got that line and I'm trying to get rid of that line. Okay, when you do your final, you're going to have to do a lot of work on this. With this one, I'm not too concerned about that. Okay, all right, I must admit that it is driving me crazy that it's not perfect, but I'll let it go. Okay, so first I'm going to place that in. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to put in my apple. I just want the apple, I don't want the background. When we take our images, you won't have to deal with the background because the background should be white. In this case, I'll come through on my apple, make sure I'm on the correct layer. And it seems to be being difficult with me. Quick selection tool, come on. What's it doing here? Okay, let's try magic wand. There we go, that's working. Okay, so I'm going to remove my background. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I do have a little bit of a perfectionist issue here, so I'm probably going to go a little bit more than I need to. Okay, Control D. I'm going to get rid of that, clean that up a little bit, get rid of that little part. So my idea was that the apple was going to drip, and it was going to drip out of the eye. So in this case, I'm going to take the apple, and I hit Control T. I'm going to shrink it because I want it to drip out of the eye, and I'm going to invert it because I want it to go upside down. I'm going to hook it up to the eye, and that tear was coming from right about here. So now we'll check that off. And then that's falling, but I want it to kind of drip. So to make that thing drip, I am going to go to Edit, and I'm going to go to Puppet Warp, and I'm going to zoom in, and we'll see if we can make this work. Okay, so remember that Puppet Warp is like a blanket. And every time I make a mark, or make a dot, I'm adding a rock that's sitting on top of the blanket. And then eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to start pulling on those rocks, which makes the blanket drag. Okay, we're going to try that, and then we're going to do a little bit more work on it afterwards. I'm going to pull this way up to the eye like it's dripping. I'll hit check mark. I'm going to pretend that it looks good. Zoom out, zoom in, move it over. And it's torn a little bit too much, but I think you get the basic idea with what I'm searching for here. I also don't like how that turned, so I'm going to take the eraser and I'm just going to clean up that edge if I can, trying to make it look like an apple teardrop. By the way, I'm not saying that this is the best idea on the planet. Okay, the other thing I need to do is, since that's going to be falling down, there's going to be a shadow down here. In order to make that shadow, I'm simply going to select a gray, and it's going to have to be pretty dark, so I'm going to select in there. And then I'm going to go to a paintbrush. I'm going to make sure that the opacity is dropped, and I'm going to create a little shadow down here. And that gray is not dark enough, so I'm going to have to go to the black. And even the black isn't working well, but we'll try to get that shadow in the best we can. All right. So I have the apple falling, and then my last thing was a teacup. I was originally going to have the apple kind of falling into the teacup. I'm not sure how that's going to work anymore, but regardless, the first thing I have to do is I have to go through and make sure that I'm on the teacup layer, and I'm going to delete the background of the teacup if I can. In this case, I'm going to have to drop the tolerance in order to do this. Sorry about that noise. Let's try 15. This one's a tough image to work with. It's not wanting to delete the background. Okay, I might want to go find another image at this point because I'm down to 15 tolerance and it's still not working. Let's try 10. Okay, we're getting better. One of the things I could do at this point is simply go to the eraser tool and be like, okay, let's just erase it. It doesn't need to be perfect. That's my big point here. I mean, I'm doing this in like 15 minutes and I'm giving you guys 3 days. So yours should look better than mine. Okay, so now I have my teacup. I'm going to try one last time to get that part in there. Okay, we're doing okay. Okay, so now I have my teacup. It's transparent. I'm going to deselect that teacup. And in this case, to make it a little bit surreal, I'm going to go hit Control T, and I'm going to make this a really big teacup. It's okay if it gets pixelated because this is just a draft. And I want this teacup to look like the tree is growing out of it. So in this case, because it's just a draft, there's a couple things that I can do. I can go through and I can grab my brush. I can put a shadow down here. Need to bump up the opacity again. I can also take my tree, and rather than move the tree, I can take my brush, shrink it down a little bit, and I'm just going to draw in the stem to demonstrate that that's what I'm trying to do. All right, I'll be real honest, the composition isn't perfect. There are a few problems here. the first thing I would do is I'd probably be moving this over, or in this case, maybe I'll try a little bit of a crop on it. Let's try that. A little bit better composition on it. Yeah, that's starting to look decent. Okay, starting to come together. I could add in other things instead of the apple. Maybe I'll use an egg, but something different. All I'm trying to do is coming up with a basic idea and then piece this together using, again, a body part, a landscape or an interior, and two small objects which we'll be taking pictures of in class.